What you'll need to make the purse is a cat or two. I have a cat that's camera shy, but Lola, she's not camera shy. Your main outer piece, you'll need two outer pieces of fabric cut 13 inches by 13 inches, two pieces of foam cut the same 13 by 13. Packet number 2 for the body lining of the purse, two outer pieces of fabric cut 10 and 3/4 inches by 2 and 3/4 inches, two lining pieces of fabric cut 10 and a half inches by 8 and a quarter inches. Sorry, 10 and a quarter by 8 and a quarter. Packet number 3 for the first side panel, one outer piece of fabric cut 27 inches by 4.5 inches, and a piece of fusible fleece cut 25.5 inches by 4 inches. And then this is what we'll sew our D-rings on. I put that on there so I won't forget. I've forgotten to sew them on. Luckily, I had time to sew them on. Packet number 4 is the second side panel. One lining piece of fabric cut at 26 inches by 4.5 inches, and two outer pieces of fabric cut at 2 3/4 inches by 4.5 inches. Packet number 5, two lining pieces of fabric cut 10 1/4 inches by 8 1/4 inches, two outer pieces of fabric cut the same, 10 1/4 by 8 1/4, and two pieces of interfacing 9 3/4 by 7 3/4. For the inner pockets, packet number 6 is two pieces of outer fabric cut 6.5 inches by 8 inches, two pieces of medium weight interfacing cut 6 inches by 7.5, and two pieces of the lining fabric cut at 1 3/4 inches by 8.5 inches. For the outside zipper pocket, you'll need one piece of lining fabric cut 9.5 inches by 12 inches, a piece of interfacing cut 9 inches by 11.5 inches, and a zipper cut at 9.5 inches. For the inside zipper pocket, cut it a zipper at 8 inches and four pieces of coordinating fabric just wider than your zipper and 2 inches long each. I have pre-made my strap. It's 55 inches long. I didn't have any strap webbing to match this, and I went ahead and just made a strap. A label, if desired, we'll put that on the front underneath the zipper for the front pocket, and then magnetic snaps. The first thing that you'll do is take your ruler diagonally across one of the pieces of 13 by 13 and draw a line. And then, so I go this way, put your 2-inch mark on that first line you drew and draw another line. I use friction pens. And then scoot that over and draw another line. And then turn your fabric this way. Draw your lines to make a grid like this. So we'll take each one of these and sew each one onto the foam. I'm going to use like a 3-stitch length, and then we'll cut it to size. After you sew on your quilting onto the foam, I cut it to size, which is 10 1/4 by 9 1/4. And now, just for safety, security of these stitches, I'm going to just sew around 1/4 inch all the way around just to lock these in, even though our seams will be 3/8 of an inch for the most part. I just do it to make sure they stay put. So I'll do that and we'll move on. For the outside zipper pocket, I folded the panel in half, the front panel in half, drew a line. Then I measured 2 inches down from the top and drew another line. Measured 1/4 inch down from that and drew that red line. And then 1/4 inch down from that and drew the purple line. I sewed my label on about just over 1/4 inch beneath that. Next, take your lining that you put the interfacing on the back. I creased it. I set the crease of this on the center mark of the panel. I measured in 1.5 inches on each side and drew a line. And then I made my triangles. What you'll do next is set your panel right sides together with the lining. Pin this on. And next we're going to sew around the box. So we'll start at one corner. We'll go down the purple up here and around the top. I made 3 colors just for this example. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this. After you sew that on, come over and either start out with your ruler and rotary cutter, which is what I did, and then I finished it off with scissors. So I just cut into the triangles at a diagonal on both sides. And now we'll turn it right side out and see if there's any puckers that we need to recut. When I turned this to the inside, you can see that there's some puckers here. So I'm going to stick it back through and trim just a little bit closer to the stitches at these triangles. Just a tiny fraction until you get just to the stitches at the side. You don't want to cut into those stitches. So I did just maybe a very, very tiny cut. So this looks a lot better. It's still a tiny bit puckered, but you can't see it on the front because I'm using foam, so it's easier. It's thicker there. So next what you'll do is get your zipper and place your zipper right side up on your surface. Position your pocket hole there and sew the zipper on. Now, because of the foam, I can see some of the fabric for the lining of the pocket, and I'm okay with that because it matches this pretty good. So I'm just going to sew around the box to secure that zipper on. Okay, the zipper is sewn in. Next, turn it over and trim the sides of your zipper just a little bit. Next, take the zipper pocket, fold it up, and sew a 1/4 inch seam just along the top. After you sew the top, bring the pocket down like this and sew a 1/4 inch seam along each side, making sure to bend this out of the way so it doesn't get caught. Okay, so the zipper pocket's done. Next, from the number 3 pack side panel 1, the long strip that you quilted, fold it in half long ways, make a little notch on each end, just like this. Cut 2 2-inch pieces of your adjustable strap fabric, put your D-ring on there, and sew it centered on the notch on each end. So I will do that, and we'll move on to the next step. Now take your front panel, fold it in half, and make a little notch at the bottom here. And with your long piece, your side panel piece, fold it in half and make a notch at the top and bottom. Okay, now match the notches. Fold your panel to the side panel, right sides together, and clip at 1/4 inch up from the side of the panel. Just cut a little slice in each side. So about 1/4 inch from the side of the panel, make a little slice. And then fold up your side panel and clip it, and then we'll sew 3/8 of an inch seam down each side. I do the sides first, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, I've sewn the sides, and now I'm going to sew the bottom. Just make sure this is out of the way, and sew the 3/8 of an inch seam along the bottom. Okay, there you have it. The front panel and the side is on. Next, we're going to move on to putting the back panel on. I've clipped the panel on. What I do at first is I sew each side 3/8 of an inch seam, and I leave 1/4 inch at the bottom unsewn. So sew each side and then the bottom, and the outer panels will be done. After you get that sewn together, just trim the corners off a little bit and then turn it right side out. Okay, you're done with the outer panels. Looks really good, and we'll move on to the next step. Next, take packet number 2, the body lining packet. Take your smaller accent pieces, fold them right sides together, and sew a 1/4 inch seam along the top of each. Okay, after that, trim if you need to trim, and then, excuse me, sew a top stitch right along here. For the inside pockets, it's packet number 6. Affix your interfacing to each pocket, and then fold them in half and press it right sides together, and sew each side seam at 1/4 inch seam. Trim the bottom corners off, turn them right side out, and press them. After you've pressed them, take the accent fabric, lay it on top here, and sew a 1/4 inch seam. When that is sewn on, take it to the iron and press it. And then what you'll do is you'll fold each corner in and press the corners. Fold this in half and press it, and turn it over again and press it. And then clip it just so it stays in place for you. Oop. And then take it to the sewing machine and sew a stitch in the ditch right here. Okay, after your pockets are sewn, I measured from this line 1.5 inches, and I put a mark there with my friction pin. I pinned on each pocket. On one of them, I marked 1.5 inches over and drew a line, and this will be our pen pocket. so that our pens don't get lost in our purse. At least we'll have one that we can find. So go ahead and sew your pocket on and this line. When you get your pocket sewn on, and I took the line of the friction pen off with the iron. I did iron on about 1.5-inch square piece of interfacing. In the center, I folded this over, ironed on the interfacing. I marked 1 inch up from this top's line. Drew that line. I took the backing from the snap. I set it here, and I just drew a couple lines in the long holes. And then I took the seam ripper and gently made a little slice in each one of those holes here. Next, take half of your magnetic snap and push it through the holes you just made with the seam ripper. Put the backing on it and fold over the metal tabs. And do that with the other half of the snap on this piece. All right, your snaps are on, and next we'll move on. Grab your packet 4, side panel number 2. Take the accent fabric, lay it face down, right sides together on each end. Sew a 1/4 inch seam, press it towards the lining fabric, and then sew your top stitch. So sew it on, press it open, and then sew a top stitch, just like we did the other one. Okay, that's done, and we're going to set this aside and work on the inner panels. Okay, grab your zipper and your zipper tabs that you cut. Place your zipper right side up on a right side up tab. Take another tab right side down and sew a 1/4 inch at each end. So this one I'm going to sew just across to keep this closed while I'm sewing the tabs on. After you get your tabs sewn on your zipper, open it up, fold it in half, and make a little notch for the center of the zipper. For your number 5 packet, your main inner pieces, iron on your interfacing onto the lining fabric, and then fold each one in half and make a notch at the top and bottom of each one. Lay your zipper right side down, whichever way you want your zipper to go here. Make sure the zipper pull is facing down so it doesn't catch your needle. Center the notches. Place one of the accent outer pieces of fabric on the top and clip this together as neat as you can. And then use your zipper foot and sew along the zipper edge. After you sew that on, fold the sides together and press it gently, not to melt your zipper, and then sew a top stitch right along here. Next, lay your other fabric on top that matches. Turn it over, lay this coordinating fabric on top, line it all up nice and even, clip it, and then stitch along the zipper with your zipper foot. After that's sewn on, open it, press it, and then sew your top stitch right along here. Okay, when your top stitches are done, fold everything together. I'm going to trim just a little bit off each edge that's a little wonky, and then sew your sides and your bottom together. 3/8 of an inch seam. Your beautiful zipper pocket is all done. We'll set this aside for now. Next, for the pocket panel, take one of your pieces, make a notch at the bottom of your long piece that you sewed the ends on. Set that right sides together. Take your scissors and come a 1/4 inch in from the panel piece and make a mark about a 1/4 inch. Fold your sides up and clip them, and then sew 3/8 of an inch seam. Do your left and right sides first, and then the bottom like we did on the first panel. And I'll get all that done, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, I sewed each side, and then turned it, made sure none of this was in the way, and sewed the bottom. For the other side, lay your zipper pocket on top, and sew this on both sides and the bottom. Okay, now that your pocket is sewn onto the panel, turn it right sides into the other, and we're going to sew the left and right side first. So you can clip it if you want to, but sew the left and the right sides on. On the bottom, just sew a couple of inches in, maybe 1.5 inches in on each side. I like to leave a big piece open because I do use the machine to close it after we turn it right side out. So just sew your bottom on 1.5 inches or so each way. The next step is to, when you have this right side out, make sure your front is going, whichever side you want it to go on. And I want my pen pouch to the back, so I'm going to make sure my label is going towards the front. So just stick this inside of one of the panels here. I clip the side seams first and then clip around it, and we'll sew a 3/8 of an inch seam all around the top, and then we'll turn it right side out on that opening that we left. After you sew around the top, turn it right side out. I went to the iron and I pressed this seam over 1/4 inch, and I'm going to sew this here. You can hand sew this. I don't. So I'm just going to sew it. See, I just folded the pocket part in and sewed it together like that. Next, put your lining into your purse. Next, take your top and fold it in and press it, and we're going to sew a top stitch about 1/4 inch from the top. Okay, everybody, here's the finished purse. It turned out very nice. We've got the front zipper pocket with the cute paisley lining. We've got the snap top, zipper inside pocket, a back pocket with a pen space, and another front open pocket. The purse measures 9.5 inches wide, 8.5 inches tall, and 3 inches deep, and I think it's just a really cute purse. And I thank you all for watching. I'm going to add my Venmo handle, pdcant. I don't have a website where I put patterns on to sell. I just make these videos with free patterns, so if anyone would like to donate or give a tip, I would really appreciate it. I do have medical bills I'm still paying off for my last 2 foot surgeries. A screw did break in my foot from the last surgery, so I have to have that repaired, and when he does that, he has to fuse more bones together. I worked on my feet my whole entire life way too hard, and I'm paying for it now that I'm nearing retirement in just a few years. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share my videos.